being willing to put in the time and effort to work on a change, to recognize, okay, I have a blind spot. There's something I need to change about how I'm working, how I'm interacting with people, what I'm doing inside of myself. And, okay, now I see it. Now what I do about it, I have to actually make a commitment to myself and to my future, my existing and future clients or professionals I'm working with, that I'm actually going to take the time and effort to figure out how to make that change and implement it. And I think that's very hard for many professionals to do with busy lives.
The Center for Understanding in Conflict welcomes you to The Other Chair, a monthly podcast exploring the dynamics of conflict and how to bring the human issues to the table. Together with our guests, we explore how the power of understanding each other can lead to better solutions for people on both sides of an issue. We will also share tips for managing your own mediation practice, approaching conflict in the professional world, and ways to apply our understanding-based model in your personal life.
Hello to our listeners, and welcome to The Other Chair. My name is James Dyke. Today's guest is Catherine Connor, a director and trainer at the Center for Understanding in Conflict and an attorney practicing mediation and collaborative practice in Santa Rosa, California. This episode of The Other Chair explores how mediators, especially career practitioners, can continue to learn, grow, and refine their skills after becoming established in the field and bringing together people in conflict for many years. Hello, Catherine, and welcome back to The Other Chair.
Hello, James. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you. You're so busy these days. I appreciate you're still able to find time to come on this program, which we've been doing for about a year and a half now, and give some more helpful information to our listeners as you do every day through your work at the center. So thank you.
I'm always happy to chat with you and to provide information that's useful to people. That's part of what I've been trying to do my whole career.
And it shows. It shows in all the stuff that you do. So let's start with your career. Let's talk a little bit. You've been kind of doing a lot of things on a lot of fronts for many years. You've been an attorney, a collaborative practice attorney. You work a lot in alternative dispute resolution, both through your practice and then through other organizations that you support, in addition to training with the center for many years, helping to build up the nonprofit that we have, while also mediating and teaching others how to mediate. So I think I kind of answered the question for you, but maybe give a brief overview of your career as an alternative dispute resolution practitioner.
I think it would be helpful, actually, because people often ask, well, how did you start doing ADR, and are concerned about how they can make a transition out of some other career or way of working. So I became an attorney, licensed in 1982. So I've been around a long time. And I took my first training in mediation in 1984. So fairly soon after I had started practicing. But I didn't do that much mediation initially. I was in a sort of traditional family law practice with a settlement orientation, but I went to court. I did some trials. And so, although I continued to take some workshops with the center on advanced topics, so I always had a foot in mediation, but it was a relatively smaller part of my practice. And then in the late 90s, I decided that I really wanted to shift how I was working with people, and that I wasn't interested in litigation anymore and all that entails in terms of the atmosphere and what it means for the people who go through litigation, many of whom I believe really didn't need to be in litigation, and also the toll it took on me as a practitioner. So, and at the same time, collaborative practice was starting up as a separate model for mediation. I was very interested in that. I'm one of the founders in my local area, as well as on the initial board of the international organization. So I was very keen on developing that. So I decided to stop litigation. It took me about 4 years to gradually, finish up all my cases. So I worked on closing my current litigation cases while I was building up my collaborative and mediation. That actually worked quite well for me. And I just was talking to someone yesterday who said, someone else, we were having a joint conversation, asked, well, when did you stop litigating? I said, it was around 2003. She goes, I remember that I started working for a local lawyer as an associate in 2004, and you were one of my cases. And I'm like, okay, I remember that case. It lasted forever because everybody was procrastinating getting done. I was so happy when it was done. So I must have stopped in 2004. And so then I built up mediation and collaborative, and then just being an attorney for people trying to settle even if the other attorney wasn't collaborative. So I've been doing that now for 20 plus years. And then also working with the center and teaching, started that shortly after I started, when I wound down my litigation practice.
For those who may not know, especially me, could you give me a better understanding of what collaborative practice is for your firm versus traditional methods?
Yeah, I like to think of collaborative practice as a cousin to mediation. So in collaborative practice, there's a team of professionals, typically a collaborative lawyer for each party, a neutral financial professional, and a mental health professional, sometimes a neutral, sometimes one for each party. There may be some other professionals involved. There could be a mental health professional working as a child specialist, so they're the voice of the child. And there could be other more adjunct, like maybe business valuation or real estate person, people that are helping the couple. So it forms a team who works together with a commitment that they're not going to go to court. So traditionally, a lawyer is kind of trying to settle, but also preparing for court. In a collaborative process, everybody's working on trying to settle. If they don't, then ultimately the parties can terminate the process, those professionals step out, and they can go get other professionals to take them to court. But that focus of everyone on settlement really changes the atmosphere, how people interact with each other, and the energy that goes into trying to reach an agreement that's mutually acceptable, using a lot of the same skills and techniques that we use in the understanding-based model of mediation.
Is one of those proceeding by agreement? Since litigation's off the table, I mean, I would assume all sides need to agree to that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And there's agreement about the process, and, each step, what are we going to do? Who's going to meet with whom? So there's a lot of ways that the team works together and the parties work with the team to try and reach an agreement.
Over your years of experience, your many diverse years of experience, what specific challenges have you encountered, both in mediating conflicts as a mediator, but then also in your collaborative practice, if there's any overlap that has influenced your approach? Because I imagine it's evolved over the years, right? From where you started to where you are today.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say the challenges I'm going to talk about span all sorts of conflict processes. So it could be mediation, could be collaborative practice, could be when I'm just trying to help someone in settlement counsel, and even people that still litigate. Some of these same challenges come up with possible strategies. So one is where the emotions are overwhelming the party or parties, which makes it very hard for them to participate meaningfully in the process. So it could be they have a lot of grief. It could be they are experiencing significant anger. So it could be that they just feel depressed. So a number of different emotions. So the strategies would be one, I think, important strategy, which actually is important for many different challenges, is to not try and push someone to be in some place other than they are. So if someone's angry, if you try and get them to stop being angry by telling them to stop being angry, that's not very helpful. And the same thing if someone is feeling a lot of grief or a sense of loss. So it's much better to acknowledge and accept where they are in their current state. And then with them, determine what resources do they need in order to be in a place where they can meaningfully participate. So it might be all they need is to take a few breaths. And then that helps them to sort of connect with themselves in a different way than the emotions that are overtaking them. It could be they need a longer break to sort of recollect and have their limbic system change. It could be that they're reliving some trauma in their past. And so to address how can you, what is it that you need for that? It could be they just need to be back in their body. They've gone somewhere else, wherever that trauma was, and they need to come back to their body in a different way. So it could be, I learned this from a trauma therapist, drinking some water. A sip of water tells your body, I'm okay because I don't have to have all my energy going to my limbs to run away from the tiger. So drinking water helps people get body. Might be looking out the window to look at something serene. It could be they need to have some counseling or some therapy, or that they need to be in some separate physical relationship to their other party. So it might be farther apart, it might be not facing each other. I remember one case I had where the parties were very activated by each other when they were talking. And we ultimately, and this is a collaborative case, we set it up so whenever one of them was talking, they were facing their own professionals. They didn't have to see the other person, but the other person could hear them. But that made it easier for them to talk. And the other person would face their professionals, which meant they were less activated by the person than looking directly at each other and trying to interpret facial expressions or body expressions. So it's trying to find what are the ways that we as professionals can help people to be able to participate in the way they want to, rather than being so overwhelmed by their emotions that they're not able to participate in that. I don't mean by that we want to shut down their emotions. We actually want to accept and know that they're going to have emotions, but ways we can help them work with their emotions.
Conflict manifests itself in many ways in our personal lives, for professionals in the workplace and for practitioners who have made a career bringing together parties in conflict through mediation practice. Each month, the Center for Understanding in Conflict hosts live webinars with featured guests discussing best practices and sharing their experiences for tackling conflict using the understanding-based model.
So another challenge, and this again can go across several different processes and people, which is taking into account where the responsibility lies for taking action and making decisions. So this is one that professionals often have a really hard time with. And sometimes their clients have a hard time with because they come to professionals to help them take care of their problems. And sometimes you want to just sort of like dump them on the professional. And the professional wants to take them on because they want to help people. That's what their job is. They're in a helping profession. And so the professionals end up taking too much responsibility. The parties end up taking too little responsibility. The professionals can become very attached to their own ideas about what a solution would be, and we're missing out on all the wisdom of the parties themselves, and also that they're really going to be the final decision makers. And so we need to create the opportunity and authority for them to do that by continuing to come back to them and placing that responsibility where it belongs.
So in the past 20 years, ballpark estimate, how many cases and conflicts would you say that you've worked with, either as a mediator or through your collaborative practice work?
Over 1,000. I really don't keep track of the numbers, but I mean, I would say at least 50 a year. So that would be over 1,000 over 20 years, and then more, with the rest of my practice, but just doing ADR, that's probably the case.
So you as an individual, as a practitioner, both at your practice and then, in the mediations that you take on, how do you stay centered by going into the heart of all these conflicts? 50 a year, that's one a week at least, or about, in addition, and then year after year. So, for you personally, how do you stay on top of it and continue to be sharp through all of that, through all of those years, and maintain such a positive attitude about it?
It was very hard for many years. And then, because I think if you are the kind of person that wants to be open and empathetic to people and to really try and understand them and where they are, you have to open your heart to them. And when you open your heart to them, then you can feel the emotions they're feeling. You remember situations you might have had that bring up the same emotions. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing to be able to connect to people on that level. But it's also really hard if you hold on to it, and which I found myself doing when, waking up in the middle of the night, just feeling that stress and overwhelm of the pain and difficulties that the people I'm working with were experiencing and I was taking on in kind of a secondary trauma basis. So I was actually at a retreat for our self-reflection for conflict professionals intensive that Norman Fisher is our Buddhist teacher that teaches at, and he did a meditation in which the idea is you take in sorrow, pain, and suffering as you breathe in, and then you breathe out healing. That's a very, very overview. It's a very small overview, but that gives you the idea. And so by the end of this meditation, I was kind of sobbing and felt, quite overwhelmed. So I talked to Norman and he said, well, you don't have to make it a 1-to-1 ratio. You can take in some pain and then breathe out healing and breathe out a number of times before you take in more pain. Like, okay, that's great. So I did that for 3 months every day. It made a really big difference to me because it taught me how to be able to take in that emotional pain and suffering that I experienced every day when I'm working with clients, and to then let it go so it doesn't keep building up in me, affect the rest of my relationships, and affect my ability to be open to other clients. Because the more you take in that's painful and you don't let go, the harder it is to open yourself up for more. So I learned how to do that, and since I did that, it's been much better because I can be open, really try and connect to people, feel the emotions, but then I can also let it go. And I think that's really important for conflict professionals to learn how to do. In the legal field, there's a very high rate of substance abuse. And I think that's a good part of it, is that lawyers don't learn how to do that. And so they either shut themselves off completely, so they never take it in, or they turn to substances to deal with the pain.
You mentioned self-reflection and the importance, especially the principles that Norman Fisher has shared through the Skippy programs, in helping you to process the conflict as it comes into you and through you in your work. Um, how do you integrate the feedback that you get from individuals that you're working with in self-reflection into your practice to continually improve your effectiveness? And then for you with collaborative practice, how is that shared among the team that you work with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So what I was talking about just a minute ago about emotions and how to work with emotions that come in and then let go is a piece of self-reflection. But there's also another piece of self-reflection, which is to be aware of what happens in the room, pay attention to it when it's happening. If you can, adapt what you're doing to take into account what your self-reflection is, but also after a meeting to be able to reflect on. So what happened in the room? What was I doing? What was going on inside of me? Did that impact the parties or other professionals I was working with? In what way? And to be able to examine that, and if things don't go so well, to figure out, is there something that's going on that I did or that I experienced or was inside of me that I could have done differently so that I could do it differently in the future. So I think that's a really important part of working in conflict, to be able to do that for yourself. And if you're a sole mediator, there's no one else in the room, you can check in with the parties, with your clients, and say, how did that go, and get feedback from them. But sometimes they're not going to have the same kind of feedback that you probably would have for yourself and be able to recognize it because you're looking at it from kind of a different lens than them. And so you have to do it yourself. You kind of have your self-reflection. Although you can also work with a buddy, someone who's a peer, and be able to talk through, this is what happened, this is what was going on with me, this is what the reaction was, let's talk through what I could do differently. And then when you're working in a team, either a co-mediation or a collaborative team, or if you're working in a work situation where you're working with other people, then you can have the kind of conversations where you can say, here's what was happening for me. How did it land on you? What was happening for you? Let's talk about how we might do things either the same another time because it worked really well, or differently, and have a little bit of a deeper examination of what's happened during a particular session or in a case. And I think that's a really important part of evolving as a professional, is to have those opportunities for self-reflection, reflection with the help of a buddy, conversations and debriefing with teams. And then I've also been a part of a peer study group for over 20 years. I think it's actually about 23 or 24 at this point, where we met about every 4 to 6 weeks to talk about our work. Sometimes it was actually studying articles or books, sometimes, but it was always also to talk about our cases. And that was a critical part of my development as a professional. Now we're transitioning to either retirement or close to retirement. Most of the people in the group are retired, but and still, so we have these very long-lasting connections and trust in each other.
Throughout the year, the Center for Understanding in Conflict hosts in-depth basic and advanced certificate programs designed to train you to become effective mediators and conflict resolution professionals centered in the understanding-based model. Our training programs have been the gold standard in alternative dispute resolution for 40 years and is popular within the legal community with human resource professionals, ombudsmen, and corporate workplace mediation clients.
You mentioned professional development, even though you're at a transitional part in your career, but maybe could you talk a little bit more about how ongoing professional development and continuing education affected you in your journey, especially in the unique situation that you've been a trainer and a teacher in a lot of cases, but how did you personally as a mediator stay sharp on the skills that you were trying to refine over time and avoid getting kind of lost in all of those conflicts and losing the thread of what you were trying to do?
For me, ongoing professional development, attending classes, going to workshops, attending conferences has been a critically important part of my development as a professional. I wonder about people that don't do much professional education, because I think you can get kind of stuck in a rut where you don't know that there are other ways to do things, that you've always done it this way and it sort of works, so let's just keep on doing it. You don't get exposed to new ideas. So I think it's really important to have that exposure. And sometimes it's like, okay, I heard that and not for me. But other times it's like, oh, I can really incorporate that knowledge or that skill, that technique into my own practice. So I love going to conferences where you get to talk to other people informally, as well as going to workshops. As I said, I was in this peer study group where we did study things. So I think it's always a good idea to keep looking and being curious and being a lifelong learner in order to continue to refine your skills and become a better practitioner. The other thing that's been really important, which I think was a major benefit of the collaborative process, is being able to have cross-professional pollination. So being able to talk as a lawyer with mental health professionals, financial professionals, and for them to talk to lawyers has enriched everybody's practice and understanding, especially in more complex and dynamic conflicts, which, family law, estate, anything involving families, people in workplaces together. Pretty much everywhere where people interact with each other, but ones that are particularly complex that involve all of those, it's really helpful to have that cross-learning with other professionals.
You mentioned continued professional development as a way to stay abreast of changes in the field, to meet and network with other individuals, to learn from others, and also the importance of being aware and conscious of these negative experiences and emotions that could come in and how to process that. Are there other common challenges that you've seen over the course of your 20 years that career mediators might have, or conflict resolution professionals, and not even be aware of it? And what are some of those pitfalls that people could look out for?
It's interesting because when you started saying that, I was going to say one of the pitfalls is having your blind spots. So the ones you're not aware of, that you just do, it seems like it's working well, and you don't realize actually what the impact is on other people. And that's where working in, with a buddy or in a peer group and cross-professionally helps you to examine, actually become aware, first become aware of those blind spots, and then to examine them and see if someone says, here's how something landed on me, then you have the chance to say, okay, was that about me? and I need to address that? Was it more about them, something that was up for them? And so maybe it's not so much about me. But having that feedback from other people is so helpful to deciding, is this something that I need to be working on? And then you have to find out how you can work on it, which is the other piece that I think is can become an impediment, is sort of like the resistance to change, and being willing to put in the time and effort to work on a change, to recognize, okay, I have a blind spot. There's something I need to change about how I'm working, how I'm interacting with people, what I'm doing inside of myself. And, okay, now I see it. Now what I do about it, I have to actually make a commitment to myself and to my future, my existing and future clients or professionals I'm working with, that I'm actually going to take the time and effort to figure out how to make that change and implement it. And I think that's very hard for many professionals to do with busy lives. They often have too much work to do, and then they have their family life, hopefully, that they're paying some attention to. And so they don't actually make the time and put the effort into making those changes.
So in speaking about some of those challenges, what is the approach that you take when you're mentoring or training new mediators, or when you're coaching practitioners who've come to you for some one-on-one help as they work through their career progression?
So the first thing is to really figure out how to tap into their motivation for learning, for change, for looking to themselves. And so that's just what I was saying about, making the time and effort. So I think it's to really examine with them and make sure they feel really motivated to work on this. The second is to work with what they already know, but maybe they're not recognizing. So kind of tapping into their own wisdom, their own strengths. Sometimes when I'm working with people, maybe it's on a particular case or what they want to do with their practice. It's just the experience of talking through it and asking them questions and being curious and having them take the time to actually examine themselves, that ultimately the answer's there, and they just needed to have someone to talk through, to have it arise out of themselves. So it's trying to have curiosity and create with them that path to what they may already know. Sometimes they don't already know it. So we work through, okay, this is something that you need to have more information about or learn more about. Let's create a plan for that. So that it's always something that's primarily their responsibility. And it's the same thing we do if we're working under our principle of let the parties own the conflict. In this case, it's let the professional own their path. So it's really trying to help them to figure out, what is it that they want to work on? What are their challenges, but also what are their strengths and wisdom? And then what's their path moving forward?
This podcast is supported by our CUC Connect members, whose yearly membership includes free attendance to our live monthly webinars, 12 additional featured recordings of past training events, and support from our network of certified trainers for continued professional development. Consider joining CUC Connect today and dive deeper into the understanding-based model.
You have a story that you can share of an individual that you've worked with? And I know this is tough because a lot of individuals you've worked with probably will be listening to this, but maybe something that you could share about someone who's come to you with some advice or looking for advice or to help putting together a plan to be able to work through the stage in their career that they're in, and what sort of process you went through and what outcomes you saw as a result of that time with you.
Yeah, I think I can do that in a way that's at least generic enough that wouldn't identify the particular person. So someone wanted to work on shifting their practice to be less in litigation and more in mediation. And but felt very overwhelmed by what that might look like. So we ended up meeting once a month. And first we just looked at why, what are the things that was leading them to want to make that change? What were the things that they were already doing in their litigation practice that they actually might want to carry over into mediation. A lot of people think like, oh, okay, I got to like get rid of everything in the past and not carry it forward. So identifying that and then creating the plan to move forward. But because it was so overwhelming to try and do this, we chunked it down. So from one monthly meeting to the next monthly meeting, we just had a few items that were going to be accomplished. Most of the time was something like 2 or 3, just to be able to do those things to the next month. And then we talked about, so how did those work? Or did it go well? Were there some challenges? What got in your way? If it wasn't, if they didn't get done, why? Do we need to change or adapt what the action was going to be? And then creating the plan for the next month. And so gradually moving through that. And that was much easier for them than just like, okay, 2 hours to put your plan, you're on your own, which for some people could be totally fine. But for someone who feels more overwhelmed by a big plan, chunking it down was much more helpful.
The final question I have for you, just generally speaking, what advice do you have for conflict resolution practitioners who are looking to stay informed or share experiences that they're having with others, especially if they're working alone, and how to keep up on changes in the field?
So the biggest advice I can give is to create some kind of group. So it might be you go to training, you connect up with some people to training, you want to keep talking to them because you felt like these are my people. It might be you go to a program specifically about developing your practice. And this happened with our Your Next Steps program that we started 3 years ago. A group out of that program decided to continue to meet after we finished the program. They've now still been meeting 3 years later. I think they meet on a monthly basis, and they're just providing peer support to each other as they develop their practice. You bring in what you've learned, other people bring in what they've learned. So you really create a learning community. And I think that's so important. And I think CUC, the center, is a learning community because people come to programs, they meet each other, they come to a webinar, they hear other people. So being able to have that connection to other people that are doing the same kind of work that you want to be doing and that you can learn from, and you can also help other people learn. So it's not just a one-way street, it's a two-way learning opportunity. And I think that's the best advice I can give to anyone.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, as always, Catherine, for being here today to share your experience and advice from over 20 years, just a small glimmer of it, practicing the understanding-based model as a mediator and teacher, and of course, for your tireless effort to support people in conflict through your work as a trainer for the center.
Thank you. So happy that you invited me.
Catherine Connor is a senior director and teacher with the Center for Understanding in Conflict, where she has helped train thousands of program participants during her many years leading and growing the organization alongside co-founder Gary Friedman. She now focuses on developing the next generation of understanding-based conflict resolution trainers, leading the teacher training program, which is now in its 3rd year. You can learn more about Catherine and the center's work by visiting www.understandinginconflict.org.
Thank you to today's guest for being with us today, and to our CUC Connect members whose support enables the Center for Understanding in Conflict to bring new perspectives in the field of conflict resolution and mediation to you, our listener, in each new episode. You can find out more about today's episode, along with full interviews and additional information about conflict resolution and mediation using the understanding-based model at www.understandinginconflict.org.